Welcome to Rule the World, the art and power of storytelling. Storytelling is what connects us as humans, and for brands, it is no different. A well-told story can effectively position your brand in the minds and hearts of your audience, and can convert thoughts and feelings into results and revenue. On this show, we dive into the unique and recurring principles of world-class storytellers from every walk of life, to help you level up your storytelling skills and knowledge to drive real, measurable results for you and your organization. Here's your host, Paul Furlong.
Hello and welcome to Rule the World, the art and power of storytelling. I'm your host, Paul Furlong, Creative Director at Opus Media. Our guest today is Andy Bounds, who has been awarded the title Britain's Sale Trainer of the Year. His job is to help companies sell and communicate better. He's also the author of 3 international best-selling books. In fact, the first was only kept off Amazon's #1 spot by the final Harry Potter book. He's also worked in 40 plus countries with some of the world's largest and most famous companies. And he was really chuffed when marketing legend Drayton Bird said that Andy had taught him more about effective presenting than a lady who'd previously taught 2 US presidents. You can find Andy online at www.andybounds.com, and you can also join his online video club at www.andyboundsonline.com. He's recorded loads of short videos, each giving simple techniques to help people sell and communicate better. They're super practical and super quick. You can listen to them, press pause and apply the technique immediately in your next conversation. So, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Andy Bounds. Well, hi Andy, and welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time. I've really been looking forward to this.
Oh, you're welcome, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. So, can we start just by maybe you telling us a little bit about who you are and what it is you spend your days doing?
Okay, so my name is Andy Bounds. It's my job to help people and companies sell better and communicate better, and that's literally all I do, whether that be speaking at a conference and helping lots of people do that, or writing books that people read, or what I spend most of my time going into my customers and doing in-house stuff to help them communicate and sell better.
Okay, so I imagine that story is a huge part of what you do.
Oh, it's pivotal. Yeah, absolutely.
I want to get on to story in a little while, but I was wondering before we go any further, you've told a story about why you do what you do. I've heard it a couple of times now, but for those who maybe haven't heard it, would you be able to tell us why you do what you do?
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, there's a number of reasons, but the thing that drives my passion more than anything is to do with my family background. My mother is blind. We have a thing called Stickler's syndrome, so I'm fortunate I can see in one eye. So I'm blind in the other eye. Some of my children have inherited it, but we've had preventative surgery with them. Now, why is this relevant? Because when I was 2 years old, or however old you are when you learn how to speak, Mum couldn't do the normal way that parents teach people to communicate by pointing at things and saying, that's a car, that's a giraffe, or whatever it is. She could only describe. So she taught me through description and nothing else. And Dad was at work when I was young, so she was the one who taught me how to communicate, really. So I became extremely good at describing and at seeing the world through a blind person's viewpoint, if you like. And in business and in life, the people you're speaking to are blind to your priorities. They're blind to your agenda. They're blind to the things that float your boat. And unless you can say things in ways that, in effect, blind people can grasp instantly and engage with instantly, it just doesn't work. And that can be a sales team doing a multi-billion-pound PowerPoint-driven, arm-waving sales pitch, right through to someone who's having a chat with their partner and they're just arguing about whose turn it is to do the washing up. You've got to be able to say things in ways that blind people can get, and that's what I do.
So that story had a profound effect on me to the point where whenever I think of communication, I think of that story, and I've certainly referred people to you because of that story.
Okay, thank you.
So can you remember ever being told a story by somebody else that's had a similar kind of impact on you?
Yeah, it was in a book my favourite business book. It's by a guy called Fred Lee, who talks about if Disney ran a hospital, I think it's called. And basically, this guy had a lot of history of working in hospitals. He worked for Disney for a bit and then went back to hospitals. And he found that there was a huge number of similarities between customer care in Disney that there could be in hospitals. It's just hospitals weren't used to doing it. And this book is brilliant. And in his... there you go. There's rule number 1. Turn your phone off. Sorry about that, Paul. And what he said in this story about the importance of the first thing that you say in customer care, and he was saying that his mother, as she got older, she was driving and she had a car accident, which was her fault. I think she might have fallen asleep at the wheel or something. I'm not sure what it was. And she was in a bad way. And he got summoned to the hospital. And when he was going there, I feel myself feeling it's such a beautiful story. When he was going there, he was... I know what hospitals are like. Someone's going to say something, and it's really going to wind me up. And he was really expressing his grief through his mother's crash, through anger, and he was about to launch at someone. He said, I was itching for someone to say anything. And I went into the room where she was lying on the bed, and she was all trussed up and all attached to all these monitors and all this stuff. And there was a nurse with her back to me looking at the monitors. And when I walked in, I said, hi, Mum, I'm here now. And I was ready to fly at this nurse if the nurse said anything. And the nurse turned around and said, oh, I'm so pleased you're here. You should have seen what happened to these dials when she heard your voice. And I thought that was lovely. And I thought it just shows how important it is to really treat other people with respect, not worry about the rules of visiting hours, not worry about the rules your business has, but just say the right thing at the right time. And I thought that was ace.
So what is it about that story that really connects with you?
I don't know. I guess I could feel his emotion. I mean, that's not happened to me. Also, my mum can't drive; she's blind. But that exact thing hasn't happened. But we've all had people who we love have something bad happen to them, and we react very extremely to that. So I could really empathise with him. That exact situation hadn't happened, but I'd seen people be rude to my mum. I've seen people have a go at my friends before. I've been in a pub and seen somebody hit another person, and so I've seen situations that I don't like, and I remember the negative emotion you feel, and I could really sense how he would turn that into, God, I am itching for someone to have a go at me so I can vent this stuff, and I just think I really connected with him, and also I thought if I was that nurse, I would have thought, when I went home that night thinking, God, I did exactly the right thing then. I mean, you just desperately want to say the right thing to someone who's hurting like he obviously was. And I don't know, I just think it ticks so many boxes. I could empathise with him, I could empathise with the nurse, and I just thought it was great.
Excellent. That is a really affecting story. I think, do you find that empathy is a large part of how stories connect?
Yeah, and in fact, unless you feel something for the person saying the story, either because you like them and you want them to be okay, or something resonates with you and you think like, oh, I remember that feeling. Unless you have that feeling, unless it floats your boat in that way, a story's never going to move you too much. Whenever you look at a film director of any Hollywood film, they always say you've got to care about the characters before you start blowing things up. And that's right. In some of the films, I've got teenagers, so I have to go to all sorts of nonsense, like superhero stuff and so on at the pictures. And there are some that you just look at these things blown up and you just don't care at all. It's just noise. But some of them you quite like the characters. You identify something in them. You want them to succeed. You don't want bad things to happen to them or whatever it might be. And they're the films that you like best because you care. So empathy is critical. And when you are telling stories, it's essential you do your best to help somebody join you at the start of the story. So connect with you emotionally before you start your story.
Brilliant. So I want to talk a little bit about how you put your stories together, if that's okay. So from what you said earlier on, there's kind of three main bits that you do. You do presenting on stage, you do writing books, and you do sales training. So if we start with presenting on stage, how do you go about keeping your audience engaged with you?
So, wow, a couple of things really. One of them is to spend a disproportionately enormous time practicing my start. So thinking what the first 20 seconds are going to be and knowing that I need to connect with them emotionally and empathetically then. So if I say spend 5 hours in total preparing for a 1 hour speech on stage, of those 5 hours, I might spend 2 of the 5 on my first 20 seconds. So how people listening to this might apply it in their lives is you might not speak on stage, but I bet you've got a meeting this afternoon. What's your opening sentence going to be? So if you say, this is a latest update meeting, same sort of stuff, different week, let's hear how you're doing. That's one thing. Or you can say, do you know what? I've really been looking forward to today's meeting because there are 3 things that none of us have thought of before which are about to make a big difference. And that could be your opening line. And all of a sudden, people are leaning forward. They go, cool, what's this meeting? No, yeah, it's just a boring update meeting, but you've set it up in such a way, everyone leans in. So one of the tricks I use when I'm on stage is the way I often get engagement and empathy to start with is I use the words, have you ever, followed by something I know they've experienced. So I was recently talking at a conference, and it's a very important one to me. We've all had important presentations before, haven't we? Whatever that is, to the bank manager, to a customer, for a job interview. And I spoke to a few people who were in the audience saying, what's your biggest pain about sales and communication here? And they were all saying, our conference calls. I mean, they're just nightmare. So my opening sentence, I used to have you ever thing. I said, good morning, everyone. I have a question for you. Have you ever been on a conference call that was rubbish? And straight away they all go, oh, yeah. And they all think, oh, he gets us. They go, or have you ever been to a meeting and thought, well, there's an hour of my life I won't be getting back? Have you ever watched a presenter with very wordy slides and the presenter has just read the slides out to you and you've looked at them and thought, I'm losing the will for you to live? Or something like that. And so this have you ever, what it does is it gets people straight in there because they have experienced it. So a very simple thing, if you're doing a presentation to a lot of people, what you do is you find out what these people's pain points are and then say, have you ever before that. It's a great way to get people thinking, oh, he gets us in just one sentence.
Excellent. And then how do you keep them engaged? So how do you stop it becoming kind of a rambling monologue? How do you keep them engaged maybe 40 minutes into the presentation?
Okay, cool. So the key word there is variety. There are some people, you watch them on telly and they have, or some of the TED Talks, they just have the gift of the gab and you can just watch them, just read out a shopping list to you and it'd be amazing. I don't think I'm blessed with that. I mean, very nice that people have said they think I'm interesting on stage, but I think the main reason is because of the variety I use. So I never ever see it as a 40-minute presentation, Paul. I see it as I'm doing 22-minute presentations. So the first one is the have you ever to get them going. The next 2-minute one is I'll tell them a story about that Coca-Cola example. The next 2 minutes is I'll apply it to the sales presentation they've got next week. The next 2 minutes I'll get them to do an interactive exercise with their partner. And so then obviously they don't all last 2 minutes, but it's that sort of thing. So I never see it as one long thing. I see it as loads of tiny things that I'm joining together. And as long as each one is interesting in its own right, then at the end people think, God, that's gone quickly.
And do you use this same principle when you're writing your books? Yeah,
very much so. I don't know if it's a thing that, I mean, all the research I've done about how people have, finite attention spans, we all know that. And I think I just believe that keep giving value, keep being interesting, but vary how you do it. So in my book, some of the chapters are quite short, some of them are a bit longer, but if they're longer, I'll always vary the layout on the pages. I speak to my publishers a lot about this when I send them, say, quite a long chapter. I say, we need to break this up visually, so this needs to be in a box, we need to do a flow chart here. At the end of each chapter, there's bullet point reminders of the next steps. I use analogies as often as I can. So I'm always thinking, page number 28, say, has to have something different in it to page 27. And that's just my simple rule. So when I'm reviewing my books at the end, because you wouldn't believe how many times you have to edit these things, I'm always making sure that every page is has something different to the last one. So no one could ever accuse it of being one long rant.
And when you're using stories in the sales process, when you're teaching sales, I heard a presentation from you a couple of months ago, and you talk about telling a specific story at a specific point within your sales process. So can you talk a little bit about what that story should entail and whereabouts it should come and how integral it is to the sales process?
Okay, yeah. So stories they're brilliant, but as far as the sales pitch go, they are a means to an end. And what I mean by that is the end is you want the customer to buy your stuff. Yeah. And the story is part of that. Now, I've seen many sales pitches ruined by a brilliant story, which sounds really strange. What it is, they told the story, but the customer loved it, but they didn't buy anything. So what you have to do is you have to tell the story in a way such that people think, all right, I'll give you my money to go through that. And this is how you do it. I always think of sales as a 3-step process, what I call my ABC. So the A is the afters. And what I mean by that is you find out where the customer wants to be after your work together. So if you work in marketing, don't say, tell me about the campaign. Say, what do you want the marketing campaign to cause after we've finished? If you work in IT, don't talk about your IT. Say, why do you want this new IT? What impact are you looking to have? If you do my job, you don't ever say, so do you want a training course or not? You say, 3 months from now, what do you want your team doing that they're not currently doing? So you always look at the future. Nobody ever wants the thing. They want the afters of the thing. You don't want a newspaper. You just want something to do on the train after you bought it. You don't want glasses. You want to see better. You don't want toothpaste. You want clean teeth. And nobody wants what you do. They want what you cause. So the first step of selling is to find the future that your customer wants. So why are they considering engaging with you? What's the happy future place they want to get to? What are their afters? That's the A. The B, once you know where they want to be in the future, the B is you then build your case. And this is where stories come in. So let's say I'm talking to somebody and they are absolutely desperate to start exporting into Belgium. And I found out why, but ultimately, as long as they are convinced they can get into Belgium, they will work with me. So when I'm doing the B, the build my case, there is no better way of proving I can get them into Belgium than telling a story of when I've done it before. Now, this sounds really obvious, but actually people don't normally sell like this. I mean, if you look at pretty much any sales pitch, people say, we're founded in 1922, here's a map of our offices, this is a list of all the different things we do, and then somewhere along the line they say, here's our 10-step process for getting you into Belgium. But all that does is it talks about your past, not my future. It's boring, and I want it to be interesting. And then you tell me your process for getting into Belgium, but you don't give me any evidence it works. I could tell you my 5 steps for talking to someone on a Friday night at a disco if you're looking for love. And at the end of that, you go, Andy, I understand these 5 questions, but have you ever actually found love on a Friday night? I go, well, no, not really, no. So just because I tell you my steps doesn't mean it works. So there's a simple poem when you're selling, which is facts tell, stories sell. Don't say facts, say stories. So this is how your ABC would work. You do the A, find out the afters, find out when you get into Belgium. You then would build your case, and you would tell by saying this. Okay, so you want to get into Belgium. Well, I can help you do that. I've done it before. In fact, one of my customers now has a 15% market share in Belgium because of the work we've done together. And with your permission, I'll quickly run through that now, how I think what I learned on that work could be relevant for our work together. So can you hear what I'm doing here? I'm saying you want to get into Belgium, I can help you get into Belgium, and then I tell the story, and the keywords here from a selling point of view are in reverse. So normally when people sell, they do case studies, but normally case studies go chronologically. So this is the background, this is what we did, blah, 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 and ultimately the market share went up. No. Don't do that. Flip it round and say, you want to get into Belgium? I can help you get into Belgium. I did it with somebody else. Their market share is now 15%. Let me work backwards and tell you how I did it. So if you like, you get the empathy thing first because they want to get into Belgium. Yeah, then they're all excited. They think Belgium, and then you go backwards. And at the end, they're saying, so how did you do it? And then, of course, you'll say, and this is how I thought we might map that across to you. How does this sound? And then people get very excited. Now, of course, anyone listening to this will go, Andy, I get this, I get Belgium. What's the C stand for? Well, the C of my ABC, A, find the afters, B, build your case, and then C is close it off. So you then need to close it using some influencing technique or some closing thing, and I can talk about that if you want to.
Yeah, if you could give us just a small sample of how you would close, that'd be great.
Okay. So, I mean, there's a number of ways you can do it. The easiest way to explain it quickly, because I know we don't have ages now, Paul, is to use options. So, if you want to get anyone to do anything, you have to ask them. And secondly, when you ask them, you don't want to ask them a yes/no question. So, if I say to my kids, and anyone listening who has children will know this, if you say to the kids, "Would you like to go to bed now?" a child just look at you like, "No." And the reason they say no is, well, they didn't want to go to bed, but also the question I asked was, do you want to go to bed? Yes or no? So I can't really complain when they say no. So what I do is I give them options and say, hey, kids, it's going to be time for bed soon. I know you're playing now, so when do you want to go? You can go to bed in 5 minutes, or if you want, you can have a bit of a late night and go to bed in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, which you want. And so they're all excited, and they choose one of them. Or if they don't choose one of them, they'll say, can we do 12? And you go, yes, all right, because it's within the same ballpark. So the way you might close it down is you would say at the end of the ABC process, you'd say, so there's 2 ways we can get you into Belgium. Great news, we have 2 alternatives. One way is we can do approach like this, da-da-da-da-da. And that's by far going to get the best, quickest results. And the price for that is, I don't know, 100 grand. Another way we can get in there, not quite as quickly, but it would work extremely well for you, is this, da-da-da. But that would cost 70 grand. So we have 2 options here. Which of those 2 do you feel is most appropriate? So just as I say to the kids, when do you want to go to bed? You're saying to the customer, which do you want to buy? And that's much better than, are you going to bed and are you going to buy? So as a simple rule, never, ever say to the customer, it's 100 grand, do you want it or not? Because they could easily say not.
It is genius, and that approach has worked very nicely on my daughter, trying to get her to go to bed. So definitely use that at home, and since I heard you say it, I've used it with every client. And it definitely works better than just a yes/no. So you've talked about kind of using the right language there. Mm-hmm. How important is using the right language when telling your story?
Oh, it's utterly essential. And although you don't want to script it so you sound like a wooden robot, I've got my analogies all confused there. So you sound wooden or you sound like a robot. You don't want to sound like that thing. But you do need to script it enough so you make sure you say certain things correctly. So, I don't want to, disappoint you or anyone listening here, Paul. I have told that story about my mum before, but I'm very careful when I say it because you've got to use the right language when you do so. And I want to do it in a way that people go, oh, yeah, I can get that. I can get that he loves his mum. I can get that he respects his relationship with her. That makes total sense to me. And very often the only way I find to get, what's a good way to put this, absolute certainty you've got your language right is to test your story out on someone else. What I see a lot of people do with stories is they think about it in their head, but they never say it out loud. I never understand that. That means the first time you say it out loud is when it's live. But even if they try it out loud, if they don't try it out loud to somebody else, you don't get feedback from anybody else. And with communication, I mean, people who do my job always bang on about the 2 I's, which is intention and impact. When you speak, you have a certain intention, but the impact it has on others might be different. So I might say to you, I was founded in 1922 and my intention is to convey history and gravitas, but the intention is, that's my intention, but the impact on you is you think, so you tell me you're old. And then I go, I'll show you the map of my offices. My intention is to show you how global I am, but the impact on you is you think, so I've got to pay for your big office distribution, have I? So intention and impact are really important. So you can have what you think is a really good story, that's your intention, but you don't know the impact on others unless you try it on others. And I just do not understand why the first people you would try it on would be a real live audience when it mattered. You're much better off just get somebody you trust, your friend, your wife, your husband, one of your mates. If you want, Andy@andybounds.com, drop me an email and say, ring me up on this number, let me tell you my story, and I'll give you some feedback on it. But just find somebody who'll help you.
That's really good advice, and you've talked a lot about planning already. You talked about kind of 2 hours of your 5 planning your opening 20 seconds to your talk and whatever. So when it comes to planning your story, do your stories have a particular structure? How do you go about planning the story itself that you're going to use in any of these contexts?
So my plan is simply, my stories always have 4 parts. It has the start to get people engaged, so it might be the have you ever, or it might be, you know when, or did any of you see X the other day? Or have you ever tried to get your kids to go to bed? Or I might use an emotion. I might say, do you know what I've always found a bit embarrassing? Just anything at all that make people go, what's your next sentence, Andy? Yep, and I spent ages on that. So that's the start. The second thing is then the thing of the story, the nub of the story, if you like. And the simple way to remember that is people tend to like personal stuff and or funny stuff. So like 6 months from now, someone says, did you hear that Andy Bounds and Paul Furlong have the chat? Someone might say, oh yeah, isn't he the guy with the blind mum? Because it's personal. Yeah. Or they might say, oh, he gets his kids to go to bed, doesn't he? Yeah, so people remember things like that, and people remember funny things as well. The third part is you'd expect the story needs to have an end, and so basically that's how I got them to go to bed. So just a quick summary. But the fourth one, and this is really important when you tell stories, is you have to make a macro point based on your micro story. So what's the big point you're making compared to your small life? So when I ran through the thing with Mum, I said I got the introduction, hopefully engaging people thought this sounds interesting. I told my story and I said, and that's how you communicate with blind people. That was the end. And then I made the macro point. So when you're speaking to people, you might not know physically blind people, but they are blind to your charms. So you need to da-da-da. And it's very important. People often forget this final stage, Paul. Unless you say, here's the macro point which is helping you, based on the micro story about me I've just told. Unless you do that, people think you've just told a story. And even if it's the world's best story, it won't help them when they go back to the desk. And I'm a big believer one of the main things you do when you communicate is you help the person who's heard it. And it's not helpful enough just to be entertaining. You have to be entertaining and give them something when they leave.
Spot on. That's a cracking way to look at it. You have a very good knack of being able to simplify things. And I assume that comes from that being able to communicate with your mum. I've read books and books and books on how to tell stories, and if you've ever read Hero with a Thousand Faces, the language in that is so complex and it's such a long story, and that's kind of the go-to book. And you've just summarised it in 3 minutes and 4 points, and that's essentially storytelling. So that's great, Andy. Thank you for that. So I wonder if I could just finish with a few quick fire questions, if that would be all right. So when you hear the word story, who comes to mind and why?
That's a good question. I think it depends what I've most recently done. On the train this morning, I was reading about the new Harry Potter stage show. So just when he said stories, then my mind went straight to Harry Potter for some reason. So J.K. Rowling and so on. So there are certain people who tell very good stories. So I know you'll be talking with Brian Adams. He tells a great story. Ivan Meisner, Dr. Ivan Meisner of BNI, they're brilliant people. Certainly, if you haven't listened to those guys yet, listen to them. They're brilliant people. They tell really good stories. Some of the big sort of American speakers, your Tony Robbins and your Chet Holmes and Alan Weiss, people like that, they're very entertaining. The thing with them is they have the macro point at the end. If say you look at some of the TED videos, if you're not careful, it's just an interesting story, but you can't do anything with it. Though there are some brilliant ones on there. I think Sir Ken Robinson, he's called. That's if you haven't seen that TED video about education, it's just hilarious and it's so enlightening. So it's a bit of a washy answer this because I think a lot of people tell great stories. It depends who I've most recently seen, but the ones I like best are the ones that make me feel something, but also give me something I can use or take. So I don't just want to be entertained, I want to be helped.
And can you recommend any good books or websites, blogs, podcasts about storytelling?
Well, I think certainly the people you're speaking to, I would absolutely, heartily, passionately recommend anything that you see from Brian or from Ivan and some of the other people you've got on there. I love Alan Weiss's stuff. This American consultant, I'll spell his surname in case you want to Google it. It's Weiss. Very entertaining, very, very clever guy. Well worth listening to. But I think that the main thing is that when you find something that you like, if you relay it to someone else, probably they'll like it as well. So I found it very easy to tell you that story about Fred Lee and his mum going into hospital because it resonated so much with me. If that story didn't resonate with you, you'd never tell it as well. So I think the main advice I would give with that is look around, find stuff you like, and then think, how can I make that mine? How can I make it useful? Not absolutely not copying, but how can I learn from that so I can educate others?
Excellent. And final question for you, Andy. Where can we find out more about you? Where can we find you online? Where can we find you in bookshops, etc.?
Okay, so as far as the books go, Amazon's the obvious place for that. Just type in Andy Bounds. I have a I have a video club. So people who like hearing my stuff, we've got loads of people who are on that. So I've got lots of videos about how to tell stories, how to win the pitch, how to network, how to influence, and all that sort of stuff. So, and that's andyboundsonline.com. So Andy Bounds, my full name, and then online.com. And I think they'd be the main things. Or, of course, just drop me an email at andy@andybounds.com. I always reply. The replies are always my own. So anyone can get in touch anytime they like.
Excellent. We will be sure to do that. So all that's left to say is thanks very much for talking to us and for sharing your knowledge with us. And I look forward to doing this again sometime soon.
Yeah, cool. No, you're welcome, and thanks, and I'll speak to you soon. All the best.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Rule the World. Be sure to rate, review and subscribe to the show, and visit weareopusmedia.com for more resources based on today's topic, as well as access to more episodes that will help you develop your storytelling abilities. That's weareopusmedia.com. Thank you, and see you next time.